Testing, Shannon, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2.
Hopefully you can hear us, Shannon.
Maybe.
Oh, we're streaming here as well.
Oh.
That could be annoying. Streams through here. So a slight delay.
What a surprise. You saying a slight delay?
Okay, so. Sorry, Ballina, we're just having a few little technical difficulties, but I think we might have it sorted now. Is that coming through? Ah, okay, we're good. We've got it. It was just, we just had a bad feedback loop.
Oh, okay. We're okay now?
Yes.
Doing sport management, business some of my previous research at Johnson.
Yeah. You ready to go? Cool. Yeah, there you go.
Hi, everyone. Well, the doors are locked and now you're not allowed out for 2 days. I know there are no toilets in this tiny, tiny little room. Just kidding. Before we begin today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on which we meet today. I'd like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. It is a really special part of Sydney that we spend here in Rosebery, spend time here on Rosebery. It's a really unusual part of Sydney that wasn't really known for much, and now it's become a bit more of a cultural hub. This is a really interesting space, as you would have seen. It's called the Cannery, where once they did can things here, as I had to point out. It's not the Canary, the Cannery, but it's a really old building, and I think there's a lot of heritage here, which is always a fascinating part of how we meet. Thank you for volunteering your time. We know it's a really big ask. Sorry, I'm Jai. I'm the president of Vibewire. I didn't even say who I was. Vibewire has been an institution that's been running since 2001. Gavin, who is a board member and previous president, and I have worked together for the last 15 or more years. Yeah, way more than 15, almost 20 years, on Vibewire and around Vibewire, running a variety of different hackathons, events. We ran a co-working space before co-working was a thing. Then COVID was the end of that, and now we're focusing on bringing people together around things that matter. And so today is a really important topic that's affecting not just what we think about as traditional people without homes or who are unhoused at this time, but a really important factor that's affecting lots of different parts of the community. So we really just want to thank you guys for turning up and showing up. That is half the issue with tackling these very challenging kind of areas. And today, we're going to run through a variety of things. We're going to go with schedule, we're going to introduce everyone, but first up, we have a speaker, I believe.
We do. We're very lucky to have Ballina G joining us from New York. So she was living and working here. Actually, I think we met Ballina first through one of the homeless hackathons we ran back in 2017. and she went on to having a really interesting career, which I'm sure she'll touch on, in the housing and housing for purpose sector. And she has some particularly good insights, but I'm just going to cross over to her now, and so hopefully that all comes through okay. Let's try and get that to work.
Where you guys came in, all the way to the end, right inside, water and stuff behind you, emergency exits out the window.
Oh, wrong one.
Here we go. Hey, we did it.
Oh, oh no, we were so close.
We did it. Hello. So we should turn, we should do this. We did this. Is it okay?
Oh, can you say again, Ballina? We'll just make sure the volume's up here. Oh, oh no, what did we do? Volume, this one. Okay, I think we should be live, Bal. Okay, we can see you. Can you see us and hear us? Yeah? No, can't hear us?
Hey, Ballina, you can speak when you can, if you can see us.
Oh, let me just send her a message. The joys of technology.
Yeah.
Ah. Oh, you can't hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Yes, we can. Oh, you can't hear us. Oh, she's just going to test something. Turn it off and on again.
Maybe while that's happening, you want to run over the. Oh, no, we're back.
Okay, I gather you guys can hear me. I can't hear you guys. So, Gavin, if you wanted to type something up or question or so forth, I might just start talking about housing, the industry. Let me just excuse, I'm doing it on my mobile. So, okay, great. And hopefully that will inspire any questions. Please come through. So, I am the founder of Housing with a Purpose. Basically, it started off because I was just sick of representing government, affordable housing, and I had my own situation, my personal situation, which I was displaced due to domestic violence, and I had to find safety with my daughter. It's actually been 15 years on June 25th that we had to find her safety. So the housing was really a key issue for me, not just through the principles and policy of affordable housing, but it also was because of my lived experience. And a lot of people seem to find with homelessness is that must be something of your own doing. It's not always the case. A lot of people in homelessness, it can just be due to misfortune. It can be due to illness that has got them in that situation, having to find housing, separation, mental health, so all sorts of things. And what I started to focus on was I found that there were a whole range of people who are actually working. They're employed, but they found themselves in a situation that has been homeless and being displaced. And some of the key issues that I'm going to share with you is when you're leaving a certain situation, you need to take into account the financial abuse, systems abuse that happens in society in a certain situation. So for a lot of people wondering, well, why can't I leave a situation just leave? Well, really, it's not their fault. That's the abuser should leave, not them. And in addition, it's because a lot of the financial systems that support them are actually controlled. So that's fine. And those that are in a higher level of employment, some shade from myself, in this place, I'm in this situation. So I started guys with the bank planning component, where we looked at asset protection for women who are suffering from financial abuse. It's under the arm of trying to get people into housing market from a home ownership perspective and doing private renting. That's here in Manhattan. I'm here at the blockchain downtown, right from the water.
No, I can't.
And the Bitcoin Center of New York City, what we try to do is a private peer-to-peer arrangement. And that includes developers, that includes banking, private banking.
Yes.
Bitcoin is critical blockchain property because if you think about renting and going into ownership, you might as well. I've got a question here. The audio is choppy. Okay, how's that? Better? Okay, great. So with housing, when you're looking at homeless housing, also think about those seniors that are in a situation where they're just sitting. I remember thinking I should be in a car, my daughter, we could do that. I fortunately had family who were happy with family. There's obviously it's shelter, but affordable housing in terms
Hey, Helena.
we are well, we need a lot of we have a lot of developers that have empty stock and they'd like to keep it that way. Not even have private arrangement to help people get out of banking and do something with the developer directly. So we have a situation where, you know, a lot of the developers have the power to make it. A lot of the financiers have the power to make the difference. You could see policy that happened where they allowed 2% deposit or 1% deposit. The bank
Can anyone hear? Okay.
to be able to do that margin. So you would have to earn $150,000 first to actually get into that. So what you need to do is think about
Yeah.
some of the different levels of policy and when we come with homelessness and rental market temporary and trying to get and banking statements. Not everybody who is in that situation has they can present to the be a good
Sorry, folks, technical difficulties.
It's very important how we can do it. I really believe that we can do it by peer-to-peer arrangements. I believe in the power of that, and I've seen that work with housing as a purpose. When we do feasibility studies, we work with developers, we work with arrangements. And now we're really looking at how we can use blockchain and crypto and DeFi to really make a difference. And so I've been a bit quiet on the big upfront because I just believe that there's innovation coming forward. Okay. All right, let's try and convert it to Google Meet. And because the snippets are not coming through that well.
come.
Maybe she hasn't got the headphones connected properly. Sounds like it's oh, there.
There it is.
Okay,
Ah.
all right, no worries. Is this
No,
better?
no.
Can you hear me if I don't use the is that better? Like I'm not using my headphone.
Yes.
Yep. Yep. Okay. All right. I can't hear you, so let me just go.
That's all right. She'll be back.
Did you let her know to maybe move closer to the camera?
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully she reads that.
It's like the world's biggest Zoom conference.
Be more explicit. Say like stand as close as you can to the. Stand as close as you can to your computer.
Yeah.
Because we can hear you closer. I don't know if that is going to be that.
I
Hey,
can
Bella.
hear you now.
Oh, great.
Okay, we can hear you really well now.
Okay, great. All right. Now, where do you want me to start? I am here at the Blockchain Center in Manhattan, New York City. So we're all about innovation. Where do you want me to start, Gavin?
Start at the beginning. Thank you.
Okay, guys. So I'm the founder of Housing with a Purpose. And the reason why it started is because of my own lived experience coming from domestic and family violence, having to find safety for my daughter and I. Now, lots of people might think, well, that happens to, you know, women in vulnerable situations. In fact, no, I was earning a very good salary. I was doing well in my job, and I found myself in a displacement situation, full of shame as well. So my story came out of that. I found it difficult to get a rental property, even though I was working, because of the financial abuse, the systems abuse, and you know the psychological and emotional abuse. I had nothing that was in my name, and I found that because of it, I wasn't able to get even a rental property. I did even think to myself, well, how about I sleep in the car with my daughter. We were able to find refuge, thank goodness. But it was a very shameful realization, because the shame takes on with the actual person in homelessness. So a lot of people, when they think of, well, how did that person get in that situation, sometimes it's due to things that are outside of their control. But the solution to it is about how do you open up to a person to say that you need help. And that was one of the key things that I found that I was struggling with, that help component. So from that, I found that being in government, I was actually a spokesperson for affordable housing. Now, a lot of affordable housing and social housing, I grew up in a social housing in Mount Druitt, so I know what that's like. A lot of them are actually hardworking people who want to get a better life. It's not that they're all ghetto or on the dole, things like that. That is really not the case. What I found was that the system in itself wants you to be trapped in that space, in that cycle. And so when you move from homelessness and trying to move from homelessness to social housing, there is a huge process with that and a huge backlog. Then from social housing into trying to do private rental or private home ownership, there are still stumbling blocks because you have the stigma of social housing. And as people know, I don't know whether any of you guys tried to get into rental apartments. There's a backlog of people. They want to know your credit rating. They want to even look at your bank account. So people who are in a space of homelessness find themselves that they don't have that paperwork, or the paperwork is not conducive to help build that trust of starting a new life. So it becomes very difficult with that. We found trying to get people from home renting into home ownership, we found the best method was to do peer-to-peer arrangements with the banking system, looking at ways to hack that out, looking at ways with the developer. I mean, the developer needs to make money, and it's very rare that you find a developer that's willing to help people. Even with the banking policy that happened with single women, I think single parents, They said there was like a 2% deposit that you needed, 1.5 to 2%, but the banking policy didn't match up because you needed to earn about 150K in order to meet that banking policy. So even government policy is so out of touch with the real world. And that's what I've been finding with the whole homelessness. Even seniors are finding themselves sleeping in their car. They've, sold everything. They can't afford even the pension. They can't even afford to be on the pension. So in the living conditions, and trying to have developers look at how to design smart housing and affordable ways. We're still designing and creating infrastructure that is old school. It's not a smart design. It's not sustainable. And so if we do move into a rental market, having to help them pay the electricity, water bills, it's just a high kind of cost that everybody obviously knows about. And even here in New York, there's a lineup of people just trying to get housing. It's really, really bad. So trying to find a place of belonging, trying to find long-term rental conditions would be really good, but trying to get people from homelessness through to something about survival, and then from survival into empowerment. And that's what we try to do. So if you have any questions, Gavin, if you wanted to ask the audience if they have any questions, particularly that I might give some insight to with homelessness, or they've got an idea or project, I'm happy to help. Yeah, so, and if you've got any ideas on blockchain technology in the housing market, I know there's people that but I hope that helps with my story and the policy and the disconnect between the real world and government trying to implement things, which we all know.
Great. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts?
I'd be curious to know a little bit more about the blockchain and the housing market, how they might be able to help each other.
Yeah. Well, we're exploring that. I found it quite, I did a symposium 5 years ago on property, social impact for property investment. And I had the government come out and we talked about tokenism and cryptocurrency and how we can do that. Now, each tokenization, if I could look at it like Bitcoin or tokenism has a certain value, and each asset has a value, right? I remember and I was inspired by this idea. I had a meeting with Deloitte, one of the key partners in Deloitte, and Millsy told me, Ballina, keep going, because he gave me an example. In India, many years ago, in one of the slums, they assigned each asset class on a blockchain that they owned, and it revolutionized that particular slum. They started to take ownership. They started to look at they became more self-empowered. And I think it's a way that we can do that. We can now pay rent on Bitcoin here in Los Angeles, you can. I know in other areas in the States you can. So a lot of landlords are now accepting that, but they're only doing it via that particular landlord. It's not an overarching thing. And a whole block can be tokenized. And if we tokenize that to that value, and then we put that on the exchange, whether it be on a Bitcoin platform, or it can be on some other coin, stable coin, not a shit coin, excuse my French, then it's basically transitioning fiat to a more tokenism coin that's not based on inflation, because rental is going up based on inflation. If you want to look at it, rent is coming up because of CPI. Bitcoin is not inflationary, but the asset class is inflationary. So if we can do a whole block on blockchain and have people using tokenism to either own or part equity, or look at using crypto for that, I think we'd be able to open up a market and look at the infrastructure in itself. So none of these huge houses, mega, it's more tiny living, because I think that would be more affordable in the tokenism. We can get people owning sooner than, you know, trying to own a house for 30 or 50 years. Does that make sense?
Great. We're getting thumbs up.
I just,
Any other questions?
anybody has any ideas? I mean, what we did have to deal with is the land law and policies on the land law. So if you look at the Land Titles Act, and you look at anybody's land title, you will find that the secondary transferee or some kind of crown grant is on the land title. So this is a huge issue in Australia that we found. So in order to tokenize, we need to somehow look at the sovereignty data that's under crown. So that's something to consider when we're looking at home, you know, home ownership, housing, hopefully, you know, the rental market on a tokenism system. If we move from that to ownership, we'd have to deal with the Crown law.
Sounds like a big topic. Any other questions?
Hi. Thank you for doing your talk twice, by the way. When you were moving out of homelessness and your situation and you were looking for help and trying to move past that barrier of shame and trying to trust some of these organizations, what were some of the organizations you used, and what was it that helped you to open up to them? And maybe also, what would you have liked to have seen or received or heard from them when you were engaging with them?
Okay, so I called a lot of the, so I've called the DV hotlines. They referred me to some shelters. The shelters were booked out. So there was a long waiting list, and because I was technically employed, I mean, I was down on the least priority list. And for the next couple of weeks, I was actually having to open up to my boss, and it was my boss that took me under the arms and did not tell HR because she didn't want, there's a disconnect with HR and the trust of HR in organizations. It's very tick the box, or they feel that you're going to be absent for a long period of time. I don't think it's like that now. I think they're more understanding, but back then they weren't. So I have to admit, it was my boss that actually I opened up to and navigated that with her. So yeah, it was my employer.
We have another question.
Sorry. On that point, do you feel that oftentimes with individuals who are in those scenarios, are their employers and kind of the I guess support system that almost already exists around them usually best placed to actually help, when it sounds like some of those other like government systems are a bit broken, and like maybe a way around is sort of making it easier for those direct support systems to almost be educated and prepared and ready to support in those kinds of situations?
Hey, Bal, did you get that question?
No, I didn't get that question. If that could be repeated.
I'll be more concise. That'll give me a chance to be more concise. On that note, around ultimately your employer being who was a big source of support for you, do you find that when some of those other kind of systems from the government are a bit broken or not working as they should, that for individuals who find themselves facing something like being unhoused, is it usually their employer or other kind of parts of support in their community that are actually better placed or best placed to help? And maybe there's something in that, and arming those people with the knowledge and the resources to quickly support those who are in those situations.
Yeah, I do. I actually think private. I'm a believer of private, just from my experience. And I've worked in the domestic violence industry for over 20 years on child protection as well, and refugees and asylum seekers. And I've found that employers, community members, whether it's a sporting community or it's so whether it's a sporting community or it could be like a sisterhood community, a religious community, I think they are really good funnels because they come across as somebody that you build a camaraderie with. And you have a wealth of people who are also employed in other things that would know and connect with other people in not just, you know, financial industry, but housing, food also. So that was a pretty big, yeah.
Great, thanks, Bellana. That was
That's
excellent.
okay.
Any other questions? Oh, we have one more.
Thanks. Hi. Thank you for your thank you for all the information you've given. I'm really curious if you've seen or heard of any examples, kind of anywhere in the world, where they've taken something really out of the box in how they've approached homelessness, and maybe might not have even thought of something that would have worked, but in reality it did work really well. Something to, I guess, get us thinking creatively and out of the box. Are there any examples that you can think of?
Oh, okay. Really creatively. I mean, I have to admit, if being that I've dealt with refugees, it's quite interesting that they come under a different kind of program and urgency, and I find that different because it's the same issue of displacement. It's the same issue of homelessness or leaving a situation where you cannot go back to, or it no longer exists. So things like when, well, the ones with the private sponsorship in for refugees, which was the community support partnership, where the community sponsored the refugee to come over and resettle in Australia, where regional areas would sponsor a family to come and live there. So take them out of a critical situation and put them in somewhere that's safe. It's the same situation, it's just a different demographic. But they're treated totally different. And I found that interesting. I also found that insight was useful, because that same way of getting that homeless person off the streets or out of a critical domestic life, they were able to move much more quickly than the shelters, because they had like community behind them and government policy behind them. And it also feeds into the United Nations directly. So the United Nations HCR and the Bank of International Settlements would facilitate the funding through, you know, bonds and so forth.
Cool. I can also share, you may have already heard of this one, but in Scandinavia, there's, I think it's called Housing First. So and it's a focus area on just getting housing, making housing available, so as locations. So no services, not that there are no services, but the services aren't the priority at first. They were just focusing on housing first. So there's some interesting approaches there. It seems to work quite well for that particular area.
And I think you're right, Gavin. Like a lot of Europeans, in the European countries, they look at long-term housing stability more so than we do in Australia.
Fabulous. That's been really good. Any last questions? All set? Great. Well, thanks, Bella. That was
You're
excellent.
welcome. I look forward to seeing what everybody comes up with. Just to let you know, I started this journey through hackathons, okay? So good luck, everyone.
Thanks, Bella.
Thank you so much.
Bye from New
Bye.
York. Bye.
What we'll quickly do is actually just step through the hack pack. Has everyone had a chance to have a look at the hack pack? Yep. If not, then okay, great. Well, we'll step you through it anyway, so it gives you a bit of a sense of what we're doing. So MRI Real Estate Software are our sponsors for this hackathon today, and so there's some really cool data that they have available. If you need to have access to some data, we can see what we can organise through those guys, and they're keen to support in terms of mentoring. If you've got some questions or anything like that, we can patch you through to their team. You know where you are, and you know how to get in contact with us. You've probably seen, so today is part of Homelessness Week in New South Wales, and there's a lot of focus on housing and homelessness, social housing, affordability, and so on right now. And over the last 6 months or 12 months, there's been a lot of work in the houselessness, homelessness, and the housing sector to try and address some of these challenges. And Homelessness New South Wales has done this really great piece of work. And it's in a report which is focusing on how to end the cycle of homelessness. I think there was links available in the hack pack itself, but I'll just quickly sort of let you know what they're thinking here. So in social impact, there's a big focus on what they call a systems theory of change. Have you guys heard of this, and do I need to explain it? Okay, so it means that there's lots of complicating factors that are go into solving big, wicked problems like housing and homelessness. And that means there's things that government need to do, citizens need to do, communities need to do, individuals need to do. And often the impacts of those things are competing. So we might want housing, but we can't afford it. And then someone has the housing or has the land or has the availability of spaces, but they can't make it available or won't make it available because it's not viable for what they are seeking to have as an outcome. So landlords want maximize their rents. The real estate sector wants to see house prices increase and grow. We would like to see that maybe not grow, and we'd like to see rental to be affordable, and so on. So there's lots of complicating factors and competing interests. So as a result, we need to work on not just foundation elements, but we need to act on things, which they call action levers. Then we need to look at intermediate things we can get started on, things that are longer term and things that are future. So without that kind of vision for the future, we don't make our way through all these gates and processes. So while, like Ballina was saying, one of the big challenges is to make zoning different, to make, have government title change. Those are big things and they'll take some time. But meanwhile, people are experiencing homelessness. They don't have a place to live. They're in housing crisis and stress and so on. So there's lots of different competing challenges there. What we've tried to do is figure out how we can best fit some of the ideas that you might come up with into this system of change. And so to do that, we've brought in some of the problem statements that we've put into this deck. So when we get to tomorrow and you're pitching your ideas, what we're looking for is how well your presentation was conceived, how well you fit some of these challenge areas, and do you fit within this system of change? How feasible is your idea? So have you spoken to anyone? Is it viable? And then judges' feedback. So when the judges ask you a question, how well do you answer their questions? Does that make sense? Any questions about that? I would encourage you to spend a little bit of time looking at this. It's quite useful. It's online, and there's links really available, but just big download link on the Homelessness New South Wales website. I think there was a question. No? No? Okay, cool. Um, so the first challenge statement is from this rare, brief and non-recurring report. So the idea with this report was that we want to see homelessness being rare in that it doesn't happen to lots of people, that it's brief if it does happen, and that it doesn't happen again. Because what they've found and what the system has created is a situation where you do end up in long-term homelessness. It's not so brief, and it does happen over and over again, even if you get out of it, because the system itself tends to create more problems for you. So how do we tackle some of these things? Interestingly, I spoke with some of the folks who wrote this report, and they were telling me about these this way to prevent homelessness is to actually don't look at homelessness as the issue. Look at things like literacy, education, employment skills, financial capacity, and conflict management to reduce risk for individuals who may experience homelessness in the future. And they may be very close to that homelessness state. So if you can sort of imagine that, how might we build individual, what they call protective capacity, which is these things, so that homelessness is less likely? So it's a little bit of a surprising one. So when I was speaking with them about this, I was like, oh, but don't we do this as a society? And well, yes, we kind of do, but we don't necessarily consider people who are at risk of homelessness in the creation of some of these programs. And you can ask questions at any time around any of these as well. How do we contribute to change? So to address homelessness, we need to identify different types of roles that we can play. So as individuals, as organizations, as groups, how do we play a role here? You know, as the people we have here in this room. So the idea of being a sense maker, they've identified this idea of there are sense makers out there, such as yourselves, who can work through with others to make sense of this complexity, sort of like what Ballina was doing, digging in, finding the strands, the roots, teasing it out to sort of find out where it is. But even things like, how do we tell a story? Like, how do we find the story of not being able to own that secondary title because it's so deeply embedded in law? How do we visualize those things to make it clear to everyone else who is a stakeholder in this that we need to tackle it? So how might we activate a community of sense makers so that we might engage the broader society in convening, co-designing and catalyzing change? So we can consider people who we don't directly identify as being homeless, but can have broader influence. One of the ideas here was, working with organizations like real estate agents, so that as people are coming to them and saying, I need to move out and I need to move out today, and that they automatically trigger themselves to say, actually you might be about to experience homelessness because you're in a situation of financial difficulty or domestic violence, or you need to, whatever that crisis point is. I don't need to know what it is, but I do understand that it's taking place for you right now, and I'll do what I can. But at the moment, there's not that understanding. It's very transactional. So there might be opportunities there. And then that feeds into this one, which is what we call trauma-informed engagement. So how might we prepare the broader community with the tools, language, and understanding so that they are aware of what this trauma might look like, so that they can act accordingly and deal with people experiencing that issue more carefully. Exactly as Ballina was saying, when she went to her manager and said, I need help. And the manager went, I understand the system that we work in. I'm not taking you into that system. It's not going to work for us, but let's work on this together. So really interesting challenge there to build education, to build campaigns, to come up with new ideas, provide a new language for different people, organizations, companies, HR teams, management, and so on. So there could be some leadership training that we could do there, all sorts of cool things. Do they all make sense?
Who here has participated in a hackathon before? Cool. So do you want to give a quick...
Yeah, how we do it? So what we having heard those challenge statements, and they're not the only challenges that we can deal with. If you've come here thinking I've got a great idea, I'd like to work on this idea, we're happy to hear those ideas as well. But really what we do is we try and work in small teams, so anywhere between 3 and 4 and 5, no bigger than that. And the idea is that we come up with an idea that you want to work on. So you might have an idea that you want to pitch, and I'll get you to do so in a moment. And the idea is you do a 1-minute pitch, and here's what you want to work on over the next day and a half. What you're looking for generally is we find that you need to have a combination of skills. So we call them the hackers, the hipsters, the hustlers, and the humanitarians. So the hackers are the people who are going to build things. So it could be code, it could be websites, it could be comms campaigns, it could be all sorts of cool things. The hipsters are the ones that design. So a design, UX, user experience, help tell that story visually or through design. The humanitarians are the ones that understand the data, the lived experience, can do the market research, can do the analysis, and bring that to bear. And the hustlers are the ones that generally are your business people. They're going to be marketing and sales. They're going to be coming up with the ideas, pitching it out there, validating it, helping form that pitch story. So you kind of need a combination of all those skills in your team, because there's a very short period of time and you kind of need to divide and conquer that period. So what I'd like you to do is have a little bit of a think about what idea you'd like to work on around homelessness and housing. And then if you've got an idea, come up here and say, hi, I'm Gavin, and I have this idea around tackling that first problem statement. And what I want to do is I want to come up with a creative advertising campaign to raise the issue of women over 50 sleeping in their cars. And you might go, fantastic, that's really cool. But I'm a hustler, so I need someone to help me with design. I need someone that can do some data research for me. So who wants to play with me? And let's have a chat about it. Sometimes we get lots and lots of ideas. Sometimes your idea might coincide with someone else's, in which case, join a team and figure out how you can work together. Does that make sense? And then what we'll do after we've come up with those sort of little teams is we'll do a quick session on a shared value canvas. So it's a business model canvas that's been adapted for social impact. We'll talk through how that works, how we use that to create storytelling within your idea, and then how that feeds into the pitch tomorrow. And then you basically have the afternoon to work through your ideas, start building out your solutions, and then tomorrow morning we will come in and do pitch practice with you so that we get a sense of what your idea is and how it can be presented, and then you'll pitch to judges. And then it all wraps pretty quick.
Pretty quick. Awesome. So there's nothing really you can do wrong. So it's pretty easy once you're in the throw of it. So I think we're going to break it. Have we done team formation?
Yeah. So now, here's the chance. Have about unless someone's got an idea that they'd like to pitch straight away. Have a couple of minutes to think about it, and then when you're ready, let's hear your 1-minute pitch for your idea. And the format for this is who I am, what my idea is, and what do I need. So I'm Gavin. Here's my idea about impacting homelessness women over the age of 50, and I need a designer.
And it doesn't have to be fully baked.
It doesn't have to be fully baked, because we'll help you. We'll help you fully bake it, exactly. Cool.
All right, so we'll give everyone 5 minutes.
Yeah, give you 5 minutes to have a bit of a think about it, and let's reconvene.